My wife said I wasn't alpha enough after I paid all her bills for 6 years, so I gave her everything in the divorce. Except a warning. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and for 6 years. I thought love was about loyalty, not dominance. When I first met Jessica, she was this firecracker of a woman, confident, sharp-tongued, always talking about her big dreams and how she refused to settle for average. I wasn't flashy or loud like the guys she usually dated, but she once told me that's exactly why she felt safe with me. "You're my calm in the chaos," she said one night, as we sat in my beat-up old Honda, headlights glowing against the rain. That sentence buried itself in me like a promise I never thought she'd break. Back then, I was working 12-hour shifts as an IT engineer, stable job. Good pay. Boring to most people, but I liked knowing I could take care of the people I loved. Jessica was still finding her path. She wanted to build an online clothing brand, but didn't have the funds to start. So, I told her I'd help. I covered her rent for a while, paid for her car repairs, even helped her register her business domain. She said she'd pay me back when she made it, but honestly, I didn't care about the money. Seeing her happy felt like enough. Our early years were simple nights eating takeout on the couch, or falling asleep against my shoulder while I worked on my laptop. She'd call me her rock, tell her friends how lucky she was to have someone who believed in her. I thought we were building something real, love based on patience, trust, and shared dreams. But looking back now, I realize something. When someone praises your stability, it's only genuine if they value peace over power. Jessica didn't, and the first cracks in that illusions started showing the moment success entered her life. She stopped seeing my calm as strength and started calling it weakness. It started. Small little changes I barely noticed at first. Jessica began waking up earlier than me, spending hours in front of the mirror doing her makeup before video calls. She said it was for her business, but the tone of her voice changed when she looked at herself. "I'm finally becoming who I was meant to be," she'd whisper, half to me, half to her reflection. I wanted to be proud of her, and I was. But something about the way she said becoming made me feel like she was leaving the old version of us behind as her brand started to grow. So did her obsession with how things looked, her clothes, our apartment, even me. One day, she laughed at my favorite flannel shirt and said, "You really don't care how you present yourself, do you?" She meant it as a joke, I think, but there was this sharpness under her words that didn't sound like teasing anymore. At dinner with her friends, she'd cut me off mid-sentence or roll her eyes when I didn't know some influencer she followed. When we got home, she'd say things like, "You're too quiet. It makes me look like I'm dating a shadow." I kept telling myself it was stress, that her growing business came with pressure I couldn't fully understand. I tried harder, bought better clothes, started joining her at networking events, even though I hated them. But every time I walked into those rooms, I felt like a background prop. She'd laugh loudly, touch other people's arms when she talked, always reminding me she was someone now. One night, as we drove home from another event where I'd been practically invisible, she said, "You know, maybe you should start acting more confident. People respect that kind of energy." Her words stung because they didn't come from love. They came from embarrassment. And for the first time since we'd met, I caught myself wondering if she still loved me or just the version of me that made her feel superior. That thought stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. I used to think disrespect in a relationship happened in obvious ways, shouting, cheating, cruelty. But with Jessica, it came like water dripping on stone. Slow, quiet, relentless, she began treating every conversation like a debate she needed to win. If I offered an opinion about her work, she'd sigh and say, "You just don't get it. You think too small?" At dinners, she'd interrupt me to correct tiny details, or worse, talk over me completely. Once in front of her new influencer friends, she joked, "He's basically my house IT guy." Everyone laughed, even me, but only to hide how humiliated I felt. At home, I tried to bring it up gently. "Jess, you've been really harsh with me lately. Did I do something wrong?" She didn't even look up from her phone when she said, "You're being dramatic. Not everything's about you." Then she went right back to scrolling. I started working later, just to avoid the silence that followed every argument. She'd post glamorous selfies captioned, "Building an empire," while I sat in the break room eating cold takeout. I convinced myself things would get better if I just held on a little longer. That the woman who once called me her rock was still somewhere inside this new person who now rolled her eyes when I spoke. One night, I came home with flowers, something I hadn't done in months. She looked at them like they were a burden. "You're sweet," she said flatly. "But we're not in high school anymore." I stood there, holding those flowers. Realizing she wasn't just growing apart from me, she was ashamed of what I represented. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking, when did being kind start feeling like a weakness? And though I didn't know it yet, that question would become the line that split our marriage in two. The night everything shifted was quiet, too quiet. Jessica had gone out for another networking dinner, and I stayed home, finishing up a client project. Around midnight, her phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it. But the screen lit up with a message preview that stopped me cold. "He still has no idea, right?" My stomach dropped. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The texts were between Jessica and her best friend, Lila. And what I read didn't just sting, it hollowed me out. "Lila, he's too nice. You could walk all over him and he'd thank you. Jessica, I know. He's sweet, but he's just. Not alpha, you know? Too soft." I sat there, staring at the screen, every muscle in my body frozen. The woman I had built my life around, the woman whose dreams I funded, whose struggles I carried, was mocking me behind my back. When she came home hours later, laughing into her phone, I asked quietly, "Do you really think I'm too soft for you?" She froze. Her eyes flickered for a second, then hardened. "You went through my phone?" she said, her voice sharp as glass. "I saw messages I wasn't supposed to see," I whispered. "So, is it true?" She scoffed, brushing past me. "You're proving my point right now, getting emotional, acting like a victim. Grow up." That night I didn't yell. I didn't throw things or demand apologies. I just sat on the edge of our bed while she took a shower, wondering how love could decay so quietly the next morning. Yeah. She was gone before sunrise, leaving only a note. "Don't go through my stuff again. Trust goes both ways." I laughed bitterly when I read it, because by then, trust was already dead, and something inside me was starting to die with it. A few weeks after the phone incident, Jessica came home one evening with a strange energy. Excited, glowing like she'd discovered a new religion. "Babe, you've got to meet someone," she said, tossing her purse on the couch. "He's changing my life." I looked up from my laptop, confused. "Who?" She grinned. "He's a business coach, but also kind of a mindset mentor. He's teaching me about masculine and feminine dynamics." The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. That night, she spent hours talking about alpha energy, dominant leadership, and how women can't respect men who don't lead. Listen quietly. But every sentence felt like a veiled attack. At one point I asked, "So, you're saying I'm not leading enough?" She smiled sweetly. "You're dependable, but that's not the same as strong. You're like safe energy, not commanding energy." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Safe. The word that once meant comfort now sounded like an insult. Asterisk soon. Travis became a fixture in our lives. His name came up in every conversation. She'd quote him constantly. "Travis says real men don't seek approval. Travis says women test men to see if they're strong enough." I'd catch her on late-night calls, whispering and laughing. When I asked, she said, "It's business mentoring. Don't be jealous." But the tone, the intimacy, it wasn't business. One night I woke up to her phone lighting up again. A message from Travis Reed. "You deserve a man who makes you feel feminine again." I didn't need to read more. I felt my stomach twist into a knot I couldn't untangle. That was the night I realized. I wasn't just competing for my wife's affection. I was competing with the ideology of a man who was teaching her to see me as weak, and where she was starting to believe him. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The silence between us had turned toxic-like, walking through invisible smoke that burned my lungs. One night I finally asked the question that had been rotting in my chest. "Jessica, are you and Travis?" Involved. She looked up from her laptop, smirking. Involved? What are you implying? I'm implying, I said carefully, that I've seen your messages. The ones where you say you finally feel alive again. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she closed the laptop and crossed her arms. You really need to stop being so paranoid. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing? I repeated. I've worked myself to the bone for 6 years to build a life for us, paid your bills, helped launch your business, and now you're telling me I'm embarrassing? Her tone sharpened like a blade. You think money makes you a man? That's exactly what Travis talks about. You buy comfort because you're too scared to lead. You're safe. And safe isn't attractive. I stood there, stunned. So that's it? You're throwing everything away because some online coach told you, I'm not dominant enough. She scoffed. At least he makes me feel something. You just exist. That was the first time I truly saw her not the woman I fell in love with, but the one who'd grown addicted to validation. I told her I needed some space, but she laughed. You can have all the space you want. I think I need someone who can actually challenge me. She packed a bag that night and walked out like it was a casual errand. No tears, no hesitation, just cold silence and the sound of her heels fading down the hallway. When the door closed, I realized something I never thought I'd admit. I hadn't lost her, she'd been gone long before that night. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling across the empty side of the bed. Her perfume still lingered faintly on the pillow, mocking me with the memory of what used to be warmth. The apartment felt foreign, quiet, sterile, like someone else's life. I sat there for a long time, staring at the indentation her body had left in the mattress, realizing she wasn't coming back. When the divorce papers arrived a week later, I didn't even argue. I signed them like a man hypnotized. I gave her everything, the house, the car, even partial rights to her business that I had funded. My lawyer thought I'd lost it. You're letting her walk away with your future, he said. But I wasn't thinking about futures. I was thinking about how I'd already lost myself trying to be what she needed. The nights were the hardest. I'd walk into the kitchen at 2 a.m., open the fridge and realize there was no one left to cook for. I stopped shaving, stopped answering texts from friends. Every corner of that apartment carried a memory that hurt to breathe near. One night, I broke. I was sitting on the floor of our old living room, surrounded by boxes of her leftover Things lip gloss, old planners, Polaroids, and I just started laughing. A bitter, broken kind of laugh. I'd spent 6 years trying to prove I was enough for someone who was never content with anything. And now I had nothing left but silence. That was my rock bottom. Not the moment she left, but the realization that I'd been living on borrowed worth. Every ounce of validation I had came from her approval, and now that she was gone, so was any sense of who I was. And yet, in that emptiness, something unexpected began to stir. A whisper of anger, quiet, focused, and alive. Rock bottom has a strange clarity to it. When you have nothing left to lose, every tiny step forward feels like defiance. I started small, making my bed every morning, going for walks after work, forcing myself to eat meals that didn't come from a takeout box. At first, it felt mechanical, but slowly. It started to feel like control. I signed up for therapy, something I used to think was a luxury for other people. My therapist asked me, "When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" I didn't have an answer. So I tried. I bought a cheap guitar. I went hiking on weekends. I even reconnected with old college friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Every laugh, every conversation was like oxygen returning to a suffocating room. Meanwhile, Jessica's name popped up here and there on social media. Her business was still running, but the tone of her posts changed. Gone were the confident boss woman captions. Now they were sprinkled with quotes about toxic people and starting over. I didn't comment. I didn't even smile. But I noticed at work, I threw myself into new projects and started mentoring junior engineers. For the first time in years, I was proud of my own achievements, not because someone was clapping for me, but because I knew I'd earned them. Then, one night, a mutual friend called. "Hey, I thought you should know. Travis bailed. Jessica's business tanked after he left. Word is, he scammed a few clients too. I didn't feel joy or revenge, just peace. The kind that comes when life balances itself out without you lifting a finger. That night, I poured a drink, sat on my balcony, and whispered, "You taught me what kind of man I never want to be again." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was freedom. It had been almost a year since I'd seen her, when her name flashed across my phone screen. For a few seconds, I just stared, debating whether to answer. Curiosity won. Her voice came through soft, hesitant, nothing like the woman who once tore me apart. "Hey," she said quietly, "it's been a while." I leaned back in my chair. "Yeah, it has." She laughed nervously. "I didn't know if you'd even pick up. I've been thinking about you a lot lately." There was a pause long enough for me to hear her breathing. Then she said, "I miss what we had. You were always so steady." I didn't realize how much peace that brought me until it was gone. Peace. The same word she once said made me boring. I almost smiled at the irony. "I'm glad you're realizing things," I said calmly. She started talking about her life, how her business partner left, how she'd had to sell her car, how she was working on herself. Every sentence sounded like a justification disguised as vulnerability. "I guess I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said finally. "You didn't deserve how I treated you." Her voice cracked, but I didn't rush to comfort her. The old me would have said something to ease her guilt. The new me let the silence do the talking. "Thank you," I said simply. "I hope you're doing better." She hesitated, like she wanted to say more. "Maybe we could meet sometime? Just talk?" I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just told her I'll think about it. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the city lights outside my window. The man she once mocked for being too safe now had the one thing she couldn't buy back: peace. And for the first time, I realized that was my quietest form of revenge. After that phone call, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going back. But part of me wanted her to see what peace and strength looked like when it didn't need her approval. So I played it, calm, polite, detached. When we met to finalize the divorce settlement, she tried to act composed, but I could tell her confidence had cracks now. Her eyes darted around the lawyer's office like she was trying to read a script. "She'd forgotten. Are you sure you don't want to keep any of the business shares?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. I smiled. "No, it's all yours. Everything I gave you before, you can keep it." She looked surprised, maybe even relieved. But what she didn't know was that every asset transfer had been drawn up meticulously. No loose ties. No shared accounts. Every dollar she earned from that business would now come with the full weight of her new failures. I'd given her everything she wanted, just not the wisdom to handle it. A few weeks later, a friend who worked in marketing told me Jessica had hired a new brand consultant to help fix her image. He laughed when he said the name. It was Mark, a college buddy of mine. I didn't ask him to get involved, but fate has a strange sense of humor. Through the grapevine, I heard that Jessica was burning through her savings trying to rebuild her reputation after Travis's schemes went public. Every campaign she launched failed. Her once loyal followers turned on her, calling her fake, manipulative, ungrateful. I never posted a word about her, never gloated, never interfered. I didn't have to. Her downfall unfolded naturally, piece by piece. Under the same spotlight she once used to make me feel small. And as I watched from a distance, I realized my revenge wasn't about ruining her. It was about walking away so gracefully that she ruined herself trying to understand how. It was a rainy Thursday. She showed up at my door. No warning, no call. Just the faint knock of someone who wasn't sure if they still belonged there. When I opened the door, Jessica looked nothing like the woman I used to know. Her makeup was smudged, her once glossy hair pulled back in a messy bun. The confidence that used to fill every room she entered was gone. "Hey," she whispered, voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I let her in. She stood there, glancing around the apartment like she was walking through a memory she'd thrown away. "It's smaller than the old place," she said softly, "but it feels warm." I poured her a glass of water and waited. After a long pause, she broke. "He ruined everything," she said, her voice cracking. Travis wasn't who I thought he was. He scammed people, lied to me, drained my business accounts. I tried to fix it, but it's over. I'm broke. I stayed silent, watching her unravel. You were the only real one, she whispered finally. You didn't make me feel small. You made me feel safe. I was just too stupid to see it. She reached for my hand, tears spilling down her cheeks. Can we ever go back? For a second I saw a flash of the woman I fell in love with, the one who once laughed at my stupid jokes, who used to dance barefoot in our kitchen. But that woman died the night she decided respect was optional. I gently pulled my hand back. You taught me something important, I said quietly. Love without respect isn't strength, it's dependency. And I'm not that man anymore. Her face fell. No shouting. No begging. Just that silent realization that the one person who would have forgiven her finally didn't need to. As she left, the door closed softly behind her, and no slam, no echo. Just peace. And for the first time in years, felt like I'd truly won. Months passed, and with each sunrise, I felt more like myself, no longer defined by what I'd lost, but by what I'd reclaimed. My life was simple again, peaceful. I woke up early, made coffee, and played the guitar on my balcony before heading to work. There was no tension, no eggshells, no walking on emotional landmines. Just quiet and grounding quiet. People at work started noticing the change. You seem lighter, one of my coworkers said, and they were right. I wasn't carrying anyone else's expectations anymore. I'd learned that real strength wasn't about control or dominance or being alpha. It was about steadiness, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself to be powerful sometimes. I'd see Jessica's name pop up on social media. Her posts were different now, self-help quotes, big apologies to those she hurt, and videos about healing journeys. I never commented, never liked, never reached out. I didn't hate her. I just stopped needing her story to intersect with mine. One evening, I walked past the restaurant where we'd once celebrated her first business milestone. Through the window, I saw another couple sitting at our old table, laughing, leaning close, lost in their own world. For a second, it stung, but then I smiled. That used to be us. And for a while, it was beautiful. But it's okay that it ended, because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's not about proving them wrong, it's about living so well that they don't even recognize the person they thought they broke. As I left that night, I looked up at the city's skyline and whispered to myself, maybe I wasn't her version of alpha, but I was real. And that's something she'll spend the rest of her life trying to find again. And with that, I walked away not bitter, not broken, just free.